So I'm going to shift gears now and introduce our next panel. I have the honor of introducing our moderator for your next session. Jim Nilsson is Head of Partner Success for Go1, which provides digital learning for all employees at all levels. We are so grateful to Go1 for being one of the top sponsors at this year's Future of Work Summit. And we're so happy to have Jim moderate today's sessions on credentials for upskilling in a digital economy. Jim.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Credentials for Upskilling in a Digital Economy. As Rebecca said, my name is Jim Nilsson, Head of Partner Success for Go1. Very grateful for the opportunity to be with you today, and very proud of the partnership we've built with EdCast over the past few years. Today's topic is really important, and it really piggybacks off the last session. It was a great session for sure. And we're going to focus in on the credentials for upskilling in a digital economy. And we're excited to be joined by four very talented panelists. Lindsay Rice is Director of Member Services for the Institute for Corporate Productivity, also known as I4CP. I4CP is a human capital research firm who provides research and insights that help organizations better anticipate, adapt, and act in a constantly changing business environment. Lindsay has held HR practitioner roles at Rolls-Royce, L Brands, Nationwide, and Honeywell, and brings 15 years of experience to the conversation. Hossam El-Nagar is the Director of Innovation and Learning at the Thompson Foundation. Hossam has developed the Foundation's digital program, which now serves more than 20,000 journalists worldwide and includes an LXP, a mix of online and message app-based courses, and other blended resources. Nathan Jones is the Director of B2B Product Development at the University of Phoenix, enabling organizations to access emerging talent pipelines created through innovative partnerships between higher education, employers, and training providers. Nathan currently combines his 18 years of leadership and the unique capabilities of the University of Phoenix to deliver a range of talent acquisition, reskilling, and upskilling solutions for employers. Finally, Joe Millardo is Senior Director of Education Services and Audience Enablement at Dell Technologies, and is responsible for stakeholder engagement and learning-based enablement programs. Over his 21-year tenure at EMC and Dell, Joe has held a variety of roles and leadership positions focused on developing the critical knowledge and skills of team members, partners, and customers. He's passionate about combining business, technology, and education strategies to create the next generation of skills development and transformation for the global workforce. Now, before we dive in with the panelists, I'd just like to share a little bit of what we're seeing at Go1 from a content point of view in this area. And also Go1 has invested money in sponsoring this event. If I don't plug our product just a little bit, I'll have to upskill and reskill myself to find a new job. And I don't really want to do that. But just a quick bit that kind of level set the conversation and how content obviously is just one of the components that goes into upskilling in a digital economy. So more than 41% of America's working population are disengaged and actively job searching. That's 4.1 out of every 10 people. And it's always that 0.1 person that's going to get you every time, right? But it's not just about looking for a new job. It's people that aren't being productive. They've lost engagement. They're not innovating. They're not adding to the culture. The Future of Jobs report from 2020 that was published by the World Economic Forum claims that in the next 5 years, workforce automation is going to displace 85 million jobs. The good news is it's going to create 97 million new jobs. So you can see how upskilling and reskilling and new skilling is going to play a role. And while automation is changing work, we just have to change with it. And a good employee retention strategy has two priorities. Number one is see people as assets and not an expense. And number two, effective reskilling and upskilling plans. So really playing into what we're talking about today. 94% of people that leave their jobs say they would stay longer if the company invested in helping them learn. So we all know, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but building this culture of learning and not just rolling out what's required and checking off the box, but offering your employees the ability to learn both professionally and personally is very important, especially these days. So employees want to grow. We want to be better. We know what we want to learn. We just need access. 83% want to learn skills to perform better in their current role or grow into a new role at the same organization. 73% want to learn about a topic they're personally interested in. And so, just real quick, Go1 is a content aggregator. We're the world's largest content library with over 100,000 online courses provided by over 200 of content providers from around the world. And again, we're very proud of our partnership with Edcast. We have a seamless integration, so you can just kind of plop Go1 on top of Edcast, and you would open up a world of learning for all your employees. And with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick, and let's get back to it. Lindsay, with many of the world's most prominent organizations using IC4P to better capitalize on HR practices and workforce trends, I imagine these topics, and this topic in particular, has surfaced at least once or twice, right?
Yes, very much so. So
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and dive in, if that's okay with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present and share with you all today. My plan for today's session, or my part of the session, I should say, is really just for you to walk away with a little bit more knowledge about the organization that I work for. And then I was going to share with you some of the research that we have recently announced or released as part of our 2021, research portfolio. And specifically, I'm going to be focusing on something that we're calling the Leadership Redefine series. So I know we're focusing on upskilling in a digital economy, and the word skill, I feel like, tends to invoke, a quality specifically related to maybe a more tangible or hard skill, but obviously soft skills are more important than ever, potentially. And so our Leadership Redefined series talks more about what are some of those soft skills that we should be looking to upskill within specifically our manager and leadership population. But before I jump into there, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I just wanted to begin by sharing with you a little bit about I4CP, or the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We are very much a research firm that's focusing on developing next practices, or what we call next practices. We identify next practices as being implemented by high performance organizations to help you see what's coming around the curve. So next practices are typically those practices in which become what often are referred to as best practices. We specifically focus our research within the human capital field, and we produce more of it than any other research firm in the world. So we're pretty proud of that. I like to say that we are a small but mighty team. When we learn, or when we think about our research, we always relate it to high performance. And so high performance is defined as revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And so while you can understand that there's a lot of questions that come up in today's world, in the fields of human resources, we care most about answering and solving the problems that specifically are known to impact the performance of an organization. This year, we've released several major research studies. We began the year with something called Cube to Cloud, a little pithy phrase that was came up with by our research team to really refer to the transition from the traditional cube-based environment to a more cloud-based or hybrid, and in some cases, fully remote workforce environment. We continue to produce research on this topic as we all continue to navigate the pandemic together. And it just as a little aside, if you're interested in some of these resources, we have specifically what's called a Coronavirus Resource Center, and it is open to everyone regardless of membership. So we're really excited to kind of continue to share in many of the practices that we learn, and help do our small part in helping everyone kind of work through the pandemic together. We've had a lot of really interesting conversations around what's most important to organizations, and how are they being challenged. Obviously, right now, much of our focus is on bringing organizations together to talk about things like vaccine mandates and mask mandates and return to work or return to office strategies. We also came out with something kind of similar to stemming from this Cube to Cloud study, is something called workforce readiness. So really thinking about, is your workforce capable and ready for the future of your organization? The quick headline from that research study is that unfortunately, no. Many organizations report that they don't feel ready. Largely, the reasons that they don't feel ready is they don't have a common understanding of the skill sets within their organization. They admit that organizations such as LinkedIn tends to know more about their organization than the employees that work for their own organization than they do. So when we think about upskilling and learning, it ties really nicely into this workforce readiness study. But as I shared with you previously, I'm going to focus the rest of my time with you today on our Leadership Redefined series. So our Leadership Redefined series is a study which explores leadership behaviors that have become more or less important in 2020 or in the context of the pandemic, as well as new behaviors that have emerged. As you can imagine, in 2019 or pre-pandemic, the types of behaviors that many consider to be important from an upskilling perspective likely changed throughout the pandemic. So this study really tried to explore what those behaviors were. We compared this against 6 dependent variables, including market performance, performance compared with the industry, culture, purpose, engagement, and capability in 2021 and beyond. We studied 69 leadership behaviors in total and had 673 respondents. So drum roll, please. Here are the big results. So we came up with many results, as you can imagine, from the study and lots of learnings and key takeaways. But given the amount of time we had today, I thought I would just primarily share this with you. So remember these 6 dependent variables on the side here on the left. So we found that there are 6 positively linked to all of the dependent variables. So 6 behaviors that you could argue are the most important or emerged as the most important. So I know you can all read the screen here, but we'll just quickly go through them. So learning and best practices are freely shared across the organization, identifies and breaks down structural silos, develop talent to address changing business needs, builds relationships at all levels within the organization, and helps others establish productive connections, networks across the enterprise, and finally, sponsors top talent for visible and challenging opportunities. So from a learning perspective, I think we can take away several important factors from this slide, but I really wanted to focus on this one behavior in particular that I've highlighted here. So learning and best practices are freely shared across the organization. So when we think about learning and why it's so important in the context of the future of upskilling for our employees, this is emerging as one of the critical talent features of, our future managers of the organization. There's lots of implications too, of course, not just how we are doing that, but also how we are making sure or measuring that our managers are doing that to ensure that employees remain, engaged and connected, especially in this, fully remote or digital economy and world that we are living in now. It's arguably more important than ever. I just put these up here, like Jim, just to kind of do a little bit of a greater plug in terms of seeing some output of the work that we actually do. These are 2 examples that of infographics that have stemmed from this particular study. They're just different ways of highlighting and looking, across the findings from this particular study. Here on the left, you have 7 leadership behaviors which strengthen culture and purpose. And here on the right, you have 14 leadership behaviors that we believe are essential for the future. And you can see each of these colored boxes are linked or grouped according to the areas of well-being, transparency, understanding, agility, and digital mindset. So in terms of key takeaways, because I know I'm kind of running short on time here, I just wanted to share again with you that the type of research that we do and that would ultimately benefit all of you would be to focus in on what are these leadership behaviors that I can be upskilling myself personally, or that I can be holding managers accountable for, or that I can be looking for in the future of the organization. We all want to be part of a learning organization. And I think the way in which we do that is that we ensure that that organization is looking for the right things to help build the future of the organization that you're a part of. Thanks so much, Jim.
Yeah, that's great, Lindsay. That's really great thought leadership for the upskilling culture and behaviors among leaders in some really prominent organizations. So really appreciate you sharing that research with us in that organization. So nicely done. Shifting gears now to Hossam. A lot of times it's really easy to think of upskilling and reskilling in this corporate box. Like software developers can train on new languages and move up in rank, or managers that want to take courses on how to become a better leader. How does all this translate to the world of journalism, and how have you used credentials to further your mission?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for EdCast for this opportunity. So Thompson Foundation, it does work with journalists all over the world, and it was created in the 60s to help sort of have an environment where people would have access to reliable information. Traditionally, the media was the gateway to information. And we have kind of a difficult mission because we are working with people spread around the world, in different cultures, at different levels of skills, and so on. So, but what I'll focus on is how we try to use digital to kind of scale our work and work with a wide, identify talented people and help them be stronger players in improving our access to information. So without ado, I prepared some slides I'll share with you. So the basic problem, if it can be sort of summarized in a very simple way, if you can think of our culture, our sort of information ecosystem, at the moment we are kind of inundated with misinformation, and sometimes it's from cynical agents, and sometimes it's just ignorance or unintentional sharing of wrong information that looks right. And what we're missing is like sources that use the principles of journalism and to kind of act as almost like antibodies to this pollution of our system. And so this is what our goal is kind of to grow this healthy sources of information that can counter this problem. And this means that we have to find a lot of people, a lot of journalists, and help a lot of people be really clear about the principles of journalism and the way to identify kind of the truth within the limits of what is possible and communicate it clearly. And so the principles of truthfulness, accuracy, impartiality. And so that mindset and understanding, and being able to at the same time also be very skillful in telling the story and finding the stories that are relevant to their audiences, and telling them in a way that is interesting, engaging, compelling, and being able to do so across in a changing media environment, and being able to reach people on a constantly changing world of platforms, rising new social media platforms, changing algorithms, consumer habits, bubbles, etc., etc. And all of this in an environment that's really unstable, because the whole business model of the media industry is being disrupted and dominated by social media. So what does that mean specifically? As you know, is that we need to kind of, the way we worked out, and based also of surveys of employers and of the challenges, we do really need that sort of entrepreneurial digital mindset, which I'm sure has been referred to by other speakers in different contexts, which is this sort of focus on the end user and understanding what you're trying to do, understanding what they want, what they need, what their problems are, and to practice and experiment and learn and have that sort of feedback loop. And we need to be able to do this. If we want to do it at scale, we need to be able to do it remotely. So when we started back in we first launched in November 2017. We started with, we were one of the I suppose early users of EdCast, and we had an LXP, and within that we had to create our own content, because there's not a lot of journalism content available to plug into the system. And we so we kind of understood from users what how to make the content most relevant by sort of localizing it, case studies, practical exercises, using industry experts, very much focused on skills, interactive, etc., and focusing on the mindset. And we had to, and as a carrot or as an incentive, we obviously had our brand, which has sort of a currency in our within our audiences, but also we got CPD certifications, continued professional development. These are credits that if some employers are using them, they are hours that count towards that. And obviously this was in the context of LXP, so there were also live chats and curated content, etc. Okay, so it was, by some standards, it was successful because we had these are, audience that they were not our employees. We couldn't force anybody to do anything. It's really getting people interested and involved. And we had quite a considerable engagement, so 50%. We had a lot of uptake and a very healthy completion rate. So 30%, I think the benchmark, if you look on the edX sort of figures, it's more like less than 10%, or maybe I think there's another figure I've seen as the benchmark is more like 15% or 16%. But the thing is, it's a bit of a shot in the dark because we had users taking some of the courses, picking and choosing what's useful for them, perhaps, and coming and going, and on average, maybe two courses per user. So we couldn't ensure that they learn properly, and also we didn't know what effect it's having on them. So how do we go from 12 hours CPD within 60-day average per user to something like 60 hours? How do we get people to go through a rigorous program and practice and try to really effectively learn and be able to apply these skills? And obviously we need something better than a carrot, maybe a carrot cake in this case. So one of the experiments we did is something we called it like a team challenge. And what we did is we added to the mix not just the credits, but we also added the opportunity for networking. We added the opportunity to connect with potential employers, not directly as a potential employee, but sort of to that part of that networking element, and the element of honor. So to be, if it's structured with gamification as sort of a competition, you get people who will make it to the top, and these people will be honored. And we learned in our research that because of the fact that there is a huge variance in quality in education levels and work experience around the world, an employer is unable to tell how good a person is based by virtue of how much experience they have or the level of their education, unless they've gone to something like an established, well-known university. But one thing that always cuts through is if you win a competition, if you win awards, etc. So this is something really treasured by people trying to prove their ability. So we used, of course, this. This is the beauty of LXPs and the way that you can curate and create these journeys that linking to different types of activities and different platforms and so on. So we had the combination of this learning journey with not only the courses, so you had the deep dives into the content, but you had to also go out and do things. So they worked in teams, and they had to create a media brand. They had to go out and interview members of the audience. They had to try to create stories that would resonate, and then experiment and do these stories, and then get feedback from the audience, get feedback from the peers, get feedback from us, and go back and try to kind of grow their engagement with their audience. And at different points, different experts would help them along the way, explain the different processes, etc. And it went quite. We never had the platform so buzzing before, and we had people logging in every day and working and interacting and so on. So it's very, very higher kind of engagement. We're also able to track the outputs of this group of people. So we ended up, by the end of the process, we had 20 media brands that were had a bit of momentum. We had these various teams that visibly published 180 stories, and they reaching almost a quarter of a million people. I think a quarter million people, and with engagements, comments, and shares and stuff like that, around 18,000 figures. And we also did kind of benchmarking and sentiment surveys and things like that. And most of the users reported increasing confidence, and they had all kind of built their own portfolio of work, because the key thing there was that they had to use their mind to work out how to react to their audience, and they had to choose a platform that worked with their audience and to prototype and create content. So that's something that is very important for the media. Those kind of skills are very important for a media trying to adapt to the digital transformation. And the result was, what was interesting about this is that this kind of activity created a buzz. It attracted people and made us connect with a surge in the community. And when we had different levels of users, so users who engaged but couldn't quite finish, but still took some courses and are kind of started their journey into developing themselves with us. And those users have potential to go further. Those who completed the program but didn't, it's kind of rise to the top, but still have built a portfolio, become more employable, practiced, etc. And the superstar, the ones who really shone, and they easily find employment, and they have the potential. They become role models. They pull others behind them, and they become also future experts, contributors back into the mix. So, what were the cons of this particular program? Was obviously it had the beginning, middle, and end, and it was taxing for the users. So 2 months of week in, week out assignments, courses, work. It's not suitable for people in full time, especially journalists who might be working long hours. From our end, it was high maintenance. We had a lot. It was kind of a different platforms patched together, glued together, trying to make this complex user experience work around Edcast, and there was a lot of following up and chasing, and people not being happy in their teams and needing to change teams and stuff. And it was only 2 of us trying to make all these people happy, and we didn't set up a tracking of the cohort after. We know anecdotally of people getting good jobs or brands that were doing okay, but we haven't stuck with it to be able to follow up on the impact. And obviously, as typically happens with these things, if these users were coming back regularly, once the whole activity, the whole circus stopped, they were gradually had less and less incentive to come on a regular basis, because they had done most of the courses, they had done their engagement. So now, but we learned a lot from that, and now we are in the process of designing something that it's lower key, but is built around the same principles, with kind of a connection of contents and pathways, but ignited by these kind of activities to bring people in, and then this time maybe find something to land on and continue in their role in their learning. And leveraging the Edcast curation technology, we were able finally to begin to customize the AI engine, curating from the internet around journalism topics. So we're very excited to be able to use that as one of the sources of fresh content on the platform. So key takeaways to conclude, yes, credentials, perhaps, they do help to create incentives, obviously, but just credentials are not enough. They have to lead to something. Obviously, self-esteem, status, etc., employability, they're really strong drivers. And obviously, you need to really try to make it as relevant as possible for all the parties involved. So for the potential employees, the potential employers, and in this case, the customers, which in this case is the audience, and this always goes without saying, is the user journey, the user experience. The competition, it was really fun, as well as it was hard work, but it was really fun working with people. We could see this sort of buzz that brought everything to life. So that excitement, it was really positive and a strong driver. And so that's it from
that's really great stuff, Hossam. I know from our earlier interaction that providing a tool to provide the provability to employers is important to you, and it's just great to see how you're enabling that through credentialing in your EdCast LXP implementation across your whole organization. So also, I'd kill for a piece of carrot cake right now. I don't think I'm the only one. So, but it's really cool to see how you're providing the power. You're putting the power in the hands of the workers who have the necessary skills to get the correct employment and career growth. And speaking about career growth and learners, and Nathan, being with the University of Phoenix, you've got a front row seat to all types of learning and development. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in higher education credentialing?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm going to share my screen here and talk through a couple of things. Is that coming through for you, Jim? Are you seeing that okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, I'll start with a few marketplace trends that I don't think will surprise anybody when I share these, but they provide a nice baseline for us to have a conversation about where we think these trends are going. And EdCast is uniquely positioned to help with some of these trends. So during COVID-19, a lot of research was done around the future of work. And unsurprisingly, a lot of organizations have come to recognize that the core skills that they require their workforce to have are shifting rapidly, especially in this digital age. Included in that is that most organizations are seeing that a large portion, if not all of their workforce, will need to change their skills in the next few years. And there is a growing consensus that the solution to this is not going to be found in any one space, whether it's higher education or non-degree or alternative training. Our friends over at the Strata Education Group released a survey earlier this year that gave a very interesting insight. And this is probably where I can bring the most value today to those who are participating in this webinar, is to explain this insight and to talk about some of its implications. So what we learned is that the traditional approach of learning, which is going to college and then getting a job and then learning throughout your career, is shifting in part because higher education is becoming aware that the 4-year degree or the 2-year postgraduate degree is a pretty cumbersome block of learning. It's difficult to be agile, and those credentials are quite slow to obtain. And what we're seeing is an increased trend where adults who combine a college degree with non-degree credentials experience both greater quality and value in their career and their outcomes from the learning than those who pursue just a degree alone, which is what this data indicates. But I won't bore you with another chart that shows you that the inverse is true, that if you're just doing non-degree learning without a higher education credential, there is an opportunity to obtain that durable, portable higher education credential as well to enhance a learner's career and experience. So that's some of the trends that we're seeing, is this continuing need for higher education and for non-degree training providers and credentialing organizations to figure out how to integrate, how to merge closer together, and to do it in new and easier ways for organizations and employers, and to do it in new and easier ways for learners. Too long have we had this approach in the workplace of higher education and professional development being two parallel tracks that never connect. That's one of the largest trends that we're seeing right now, Jim. And I'll talk about some of the things that we've seen in the space that have resulted from the combining of these non-degree and higher education tracks. The first is what we've been seeing with EdCast. So EdCast, being such an agile platform and being so adaptive to its learners' needs, has begun to display higher education content alongside non-degree content, but not simply as a separate endeavor, but in a highly integrated fashion, where learners on the EdCast platform are able to identify their immediate skilling and credentialing needs through the content that's on the platform, and also identify complementary higher education learning platform pathways that can help them towards their longer term goals. What we find is that professional development, non-degree training can help in the immediate time frame that someone would want in their career as they're entering a new position or upskilling for the next role. But sometimes those credentials lack the durability and portability or universal recognition that a higher education credential like a degree or a postgraduate certificate may present throughout their career. And by integrating them into a single platform, learners are able to, rather than jump back and forth from one another, pursue them as part of an integrated learning platform, or pathway, sorry. Another example is what University of Phoenix did last year with one of our learning partners of Manpower, where we saw a massive amount of displaced workers due to COVID-19. And Manpower and University of Phoenix made available a number of short form, we're talking about just a few weeks of training here, for displaced workers to be able to go out and obtain some new skills and transition to a more in-demand job during that time. And the university was able to award all of those displaced workers who completed those short-form professional developments college credit. Now, it was a small amount of college credit because it was a small amount of non-degree training, but this is an example of where the integration of non-degree and higher education can lead to a pathway where learners and workers are no longer forced to choose between higher education and non-degree learning. And then finally, another example is what we've been able to do with nationally registered apprenticeship programs and integrating apprenticeships with higher education. This is an example of one that the university has done with Woz Enterprises, founded by Steve Wozniak, where they are providing IT pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs to learners who are looking to reskill into the IT field, where they pursue a full-time pre-apprenticeship training. They get screened and hired into companies that will put them through an ongoing apprenticeship. And all of that learning is articulated for college credits towards a degree, which can be up to a full year of a college degree from the non-degree training. So some of the most exciting things we're seeing in this space that learners and organization leaders should be looking towards are these integrations of non-degree and higher education credentials, which are creating new career pathways and enabling organizations to access new pools of talent who maybe historically would only have come through a certain track, say the higher education grad pool, but now may be at different stages in one of these integrated learning pathways.
Yeah, that's really great stuff. It's amazing stuff, Nathan. You know, your perspective across degree, non-degree, and professional development programs, and how you're influencing learners and shifting gears during these times. You know, really, really important stuff. So thanks for sharing all that. I know we're getting short on time, but don't want to slight anybody, of course. And Joe, I know there are some really exciting things happening around upskilling and future skills within Dell's service organizations. So can you talk to us a little bit about the framework you've developed and how you're enabling team member learning?
Sure. Jim, can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah, looks great.
Yeah, great. So I think most of you know Dell. Dell Services is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's made up of over 30,000 team members globally. So about a year ago, we were given the charter to go define the what we call future-ready skills for Dell Services. So we're given a fairly blank canvas of digital literacy, human skills, and business acumen. And what we went and did was essentially a bottoms-up inventory across all the different pieces of Dell Services that netted over 600 possible future skills. We worked diligently to harmonize those down to 20 skill sets, which you see in the middle of the screen here. We further worked across the business to prioritize down to the 11 that ultimately made up a theme of a growth mindset. So the key here is, to focus on upskilling and to really make a difference. We wanted to make sure that we were aligned to the business priorities. We juxtaposed this against a bevy of external research, some of which you've heard here today, to validate that we were on target, which we were. So with this framework in place, what we did next was leverage our LXP through EdCast, which we've had for over 3 years now. The way we decided to do it, because it is an enterprise-wide solution for Dell, was to create a channel focused on services future-ready skills. From that, we took that channel and divided it into journeys where we could cover a collection of like skill sets. And then we created pathways that would then allow somebody to learn about the skill at different levels. So we have an awareness level, we have a practitioner level. And lastly, we have the smart cards that are a combination of Dell IP, third-party content. Some of it's free, some of it's paid for, like LinkedIn Learning. So we're targeting all 30,000 plus team members to engage in this content, which they have started. Each business within services has a slightly different consumption strategy. So I'd strongly recommend that if you create a framework like this, you do give the flexibility for it to be integrated into the normal enablement motions that the different businesses have, and look at it as a complementary upskilling program rather than something new or something that cannibalizes existing. So with some work we did internally that I'm very proud of, as well as our partnership with EdCast, we've got this in place now. We're up and running and we're consuming. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it. Great stuff. And thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for everyone that attended the session. It was a really great session. Thanks for EdCast for putting this on. I'm going to hand things back over to Philip Levinson, VP and Head of Marketing for EdCast, who will introduce the next panel.